Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm Brian Kilmeade, once again filling in for Tucker while he enjoys a vacation with his family, well earned. The most controversial battles of the 2018 midterms are being fought right now in, guess where, Florida. On election night, Governor Rick Scott had a big lead over incumbent Senator Bill Nelson for that Senate seat. But since then, a constant stream of votes in left-leaning Broward County and Palm County has appeared to chip away at Scott's lead. So it went from 40,000 now to around 15,000. There's plenty of reason to be suspicious of that as well. Now, Broward County has a long history of electoral problems. Let me refresh your memory. In 2000, they contributed to the Florida recount mayhem. Just 2 years later, a primary election in the county was a disaster with broken voting machines, uncounted ballots, no-show poll workers. 2003, they get their act together? No. More than 17,000 mail-in votes were returned as undeliverable. In 2004, county officials grossly mishandled absentee ballots, keeping thousands from reaching voters in time. It's only gotten worse more than a decade later. In 2016, the county was sued once again for mishandling absentee ballots and was also caught illegally destroying ballots, even as a lawsuit over a primary outcome was pending. The woman responsible for that is still in charge of counting Broward's votes today, and that is mind-boggling. Yesterday on this program, Marco Rubio denounced the whole process for violating Florida's own election laws. Today, President Trump joined in on the attack.
If you look at Broward County, they have had a horrible history. And if you look at the person, in this case a woman, involved, she has had a horrible history. And all of a sudden, they're finding votes out of nowhere. There's bad things have gone on in Broward County, really bad things.
And the president's off in Paris now. Various members of the press, though, claim that simply by being concerned about possible fraud, it's the GOP, not Broward County, that is behaving like a banana republic.
You actually have Republicans, Marco Rubio, in the fevered swamp of conspiracy theories. Donald Trump, this is third.
Can you be a little less obvious?
This is third world country stuff coming from the Republican Party.
Listening to Rick Scott, I mean, his primary evidence that there is fraud seems to be that his voter margin is going down, which would seem to be an indication that he's not getting as many votes as he would like.
What we see proof of is the exact opposite of what he's describing, which is actually voter suppression, not fraud.
Right. Even though they were supposed to tell us how many votes there were by closing time. 30 minutes after the polls closed, we're still doing this 2 days later. But it's Republicans that are really showing voter suppression. Craig Patrick is a political editor and chief investigator at WTVT for Fox Tampa Bay's affiliate. He's covered politics in the area in Florida for many years and joined us tonight. Craig, it's always Florida, and again, we're back in Broward County. What's the latest? I mean, I'm sure you spoke to the Scott camp, too. I just spoke to them 10 minutes ago, and they said a judge said 7 o'clock Eastern time, I want all the ballots to the Scott camp. They got them. They said they call it a huge document dump, but it's not actual documents. It came to them in terabytes. What can you tell us?
I can tell you that Broward County has had a long history of blunders that predates this by a wide clip. If you're looking at why these ballots keep trickling in, the vote count keeps going up, this is coming from provisional ballots all across the state. People have showed up at the wrong precinct or maybe didn't have their ID, combined with some vote by mails that came in on Election Day. And those are trickling in from some Republican strongholds, too, in North Florida. But it is disproportionately, absolutely Southeast Florida and Broward County. You gave a great summary of the problems Broward County has endured, but the list goes on and on. We're talking about a county a couple of years ago that forgot to print a medical marijuana amendment on some of the ballots, leaving it blank, that at one point a while back released vote totals while people were still voting. Oops, you weren't supposed to do that. And with that, Republicans and Democrats alike are very concerned about Broward for different reasons. Democrats concerned that maybe a goofy ballot may have caused a lot of people to overlook the Senate race because it was tucked in the lower left below the instructions, may have cost Bill Nelson votes. Then you have the Scott camp, Marco Rubio and others looking at Broward County's recent history of breaking the law, illegally destroying ballots, raising suspicions in their minds as well. And with this, once again, it's all about Florida, and it is all focused on Southeast Florida.
The way I understand it, Craig, and correct me, by noon tomorrow, Broward County's got to tell us who voted for who and what the totals are. Now, They were supposed to, right? So 30 minutes after the polls closed, they're supposed to submit all their ballots. They didn't. So for a Republican candidate to win, and then to hear about uncounted ballots, and then see their lead dissipate, knowing that they broke the rules already, why is that voter suppression? You just can't have votes coming in for weeks. The kids had off from school for a reason. It was election day.
And that's exactly Governor Scott's position on this. The Democratic position would be because of the blunders that exist in Broward County that go way back in time under the leadership of Snipes, who was appointed by former Governor Jeb Bush. She is a Republican appointee. They have qualms with long-running blunders that they say have affected Democrats and Republicans alike. And again, they point to what they think may be either a machine calibration issue or a funky design of a ballot, in which case a race like this one can be easily overlooked. This is something, though, that's going to come out in the wash. We will find out in the course of a recount if there is something to that or not.
And by the way, when you mean about funky ballot, evidently at the bottom left, you would know you voted. Of the ballot was the Senate race. Up top was the governor's race. So everyone seemed to vote for governor and not as many for senator. A lot could be because you had an exciting brand new candidate, Andrew Gillum. There was a lot more interest, it seems, in the governor's race. Regardless, Democratic lawyers are going to push on this and basically try to devalue the ballot. They're going to look for another statewide count. But we're not talking about 500 votes. We're talking about now 14,000 votes and over 30,000 votes in the governor's election. Unbelievable. Craig Patrick, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Meanwhile, protesters in Florida are denouncing Brenda Snipes. You saw that, split the screen with them there. I should have explained that to you. People going crazy. The Broward County Supervisor of Elections.
Supervisor of corruption! Supervisor of corruption! Supervisor of corruption! Supervisor of corruption! Supervisor of corruption!
So who is Brenda Snipes, and why is she provoking such a strong reaction? Why does she still have a job? Lisa Boothe is a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Voice. She joins us right now from undisclosed location. I just saw you, Lisa. Why aren't you in the studio?
I'm in D.C. visiting family.
All right. You're supposed to check in with me with that. So, Lisa,
I'm sorry.
Who is this woman?
Well, to your former guest comment, she was appointed by Jeb Bush in 2003, but she is a Democrat, and she has been elected ever since to the position of the Supervisor of Elections for Broward County. Now, Broward County is the second most populous county in the state. It is also the most Democrat as well. And it's not just Republicans who have been critical of her either. The Miami Herald called Broward County the most controversial department of elections in Florida. So she's also received wide criticism from all around, really dating back to even 2004, where she failed to send out, I think it was something like over 50,000 absentee ballots from individuals who had requested them. But also just look at what happened in this year alone. A judge just ruled that she was in violation of public record laws from Florida for not fulfilling Rick Scott's campaign's request. You also go back to May, and a federal judge found that she was in violation of both state and federal law for illegally destroying ballots in regard to a 2016 primary between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and a Bernie Sanders guy who sued. And mind you, the destroying of these ballots happened in the midst of a lawsuit she was facing regarding public records request regarding those ballots. So that's kind of sketchy. And then you also go back to August, and a judge ruled in favor of the Florida GOP that she was privately looking at absentee ballots so that they couldn't be contested or looked at by other people. A judge ruled in favor of the Florida GOP regarding that. She's also gotten in trouble for releasing voting information 30 minutes prior than the closing of the polls.
And that was 2016.
2016, when that was actually the same primary where she got in trouble for destroying the ballots with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So there's been a whole thing, even dating back to 2004, that she has received criticism over, and it's not just from Republicans.
Lisa, not only is she doing a bad job, almost anybody else in the state could be doing a better job. So I asked the governor's office, I said, why isn't she fired? And they said it's a lot harder to fire somebody if they're elected. So it's much more complicated than, let's say, you or I. We can get fired right away, But I guess it's a little different there. Bottom line is, that's where the focus is. It's an extremely blue area. You cannot blame the Scott camp for being worried.
Well,
Final thought?
Well, he could have removed her for incompetence. There's precedent for that. The person that was in that job before her was removed for that very reason. My understanding is that's not really the approach of the, Rick Scott administration. But I think it's very clear she's incompetent, and there's a lot of questions regarding what she's doing in Broward County.
All right, let's see. Tomorrow, Saturday at noon, we're supposed to get the totals. Hopefully we can move forward from there. Lisa, thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Have a good night.
You too. Okay. Events in Florida evoke another high-stakes race nearly 2 decades ago, the 2000 Florida presidential recount. Could Democrats be seeking a more successful replay of that election? Glenn Blackwell is a former Ohio Secretary of State and senior fellow with the American Civil Rights Union. The ACRU took part in the 2000 recount fight and, more recently, sued Broward County's election supervisor for not adhering to federal law to keep accurate voter rolls. Man, were they ahead of their time. The case is now before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Ken Blackwell, great to see you. Can I laugh when other networks or other channels or commentators say that Republicans are trying to suppress the vote? What are you talking about? The voting day is over. They're the ones who didn't hit the bar they were supposed to. And now when Republicans say, why are we still counting votes? They say that Republicans are being aggressive, trying to change a verdict. Rick Scott was up by 40,000.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the forces on the left, the Democrats and their allies are trying to push this to what I call within the margin of litigation. They are manufacturing voters, and they're doing it with an architect, Superintendent Snipes, who has a record of gross incompetence and fraud. And it is a shame that she's still in this position, given the fact that through her own admission, she lacks the management skills to provide an election that has integrity and has the confidence of the voters. Brian, look, at the end of the day, what's going on now is akin to a banana republic and a failed state. And that's a shame, because the people of Florida, the legitimate voters who came out and voted, cannot have their legitimate ballots negated by corruption, fraud, and voters who are being manufactured.
Ken, you're one of the few people that I'm going to be speaking to tonight or for the next few weeks that knew how bad this was before the election and was actually taking action against it. How do we get to this point where she's still at a job, that Broward County wasn't straightened out, that 67, 66, or 65 other counties got their act together, one electronic after the embarrassment of 2000, and this one still hangs in the balance?
Well, look, let me go to the Bible on this one. In John 3, there's a saying, those who would do evil love the darkness. We have been pushing and pushing for transparency, and there has been a great resistance to that transparency. And so in the shadows, we are now witnessing the manufacturing of voters. We're seeing a welcome mat to Voters Without Borders. And as a consequence, what we have now at risk is the integrity of the election that could change the course of governance in America.
Well, the documents did come in as the judge demanded today. They do not know how many ballots. The Scott camp is now counting them. By noon tomorrow, Broward County has to come up with a decision on who voted for whom and how many. We still do not have the overseas and military ballots. That's typical. We don't know if we're going to have to dip into them.
Absolutely, Brian. Look, the great Vince Lombardi used to always say his teams never lost a game. Sometimes the clock just ran out on them. Well, if you look at what's going on in Broward County, what they're basically saying is that they don't lose elections because they don't let the clock run out until they manufacture the voters that they need to win the election. That's just crazy.
2 quotes. You gave me John and you gave me Vince Lombardi. Good job. Thanks a lot, Ken Blackwell. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.